I'm Dr. Lori, and this is Rants and Raves. It's my behind the scenes life. You all want to know about this behind the scenes. It's the stuff that happens here that I want you to know about because this information and these examples can help you. So, all right, first thing that happens, someone gets a comment, gets back in touch and says, Dr. Lori, you're right about some of these antique groups online. I found out that what you've been saying about that is, all of a sudden I mention you and all of a sudden, they don't want anything to do with me. They want to get rid of me in the group. So this is a good example. It's less about me and more about what happens in some of these groups. I've been doing this a long time. And, in the old days, there used to be just these groups that would sort of amass themselves. They weren't online prior to the online groups. They'd come together and they'd make themselves a little group. They'd call themselves some title and they would be sort of, the people that everybody had to ask for information about a particular type of antique. Well, they're doing that online now and that's fine. So this person puts up a piece of European china onto one of the groups, puts a picture up. Everybody in the group tells her it's a fake, it's a fake, it's a fake. So she says, well, gee, it doesn't seem like a fake. So she has a video call with me and I tell her it's not a fake. This particular piece isn't a fake for these reasons. And I go through the criteria of why it's not a fake, right? Why it's the real deal. And I tell her that it's worth $175. So she goes to the group's telling her it's a fake. Now, I want you all to think of why the group would be telling her it's a fake. Why do you think? Well, do they not want her to know? Do they want her to just sell it for nothing? Are they wrong and they don't know? If they're not an expert, they shouldn't be holding themselves out there as experts. So, okay. So anyway, she comes to me. I tell her what it's worth. She resells it for $250. It wasn't a fake. I knew it wasn't a fake. So now this is what happens with some of those online groups. Again, and they're saying, oh, don't listen to me. And they're saying, oh, I'm wrong and they won't allow me in the groups and all kinds of stuff. But I think it's important that you understand that sometimes there's another agenda and an expertise is based on education and experience. That's a big mistake to say that it's a fake when it's not. So, I was very happy that she had the opportunity to come to me, that I'm able to provide that opportunity, that she was able to say, I'm going to ask Dr. Lori and get the real truth. So then I was reading on my phone how a YouTuber that many people watch was criticizing my appraised values. I was actually going into an appraisal event to conduct an appraisal event at that point. And I'm looking at this and they were talking about Van Briggle. You probably know Van Briggle, of course, the Colorado Springs ceramic pottery firm, saying that my values for Van Briggle are very, very, very high. And in fact, that she can find them, thrifting, and she can find them at lower prices. Well, they resell at the prices that I actually had stated. I go into the appraisal event, lo and behold, there's a piece of Van Briggle. And guess what? Worth exactly what I said it was worth. So a lot of this goes on and on. You got to make sure that whenever you're watching, you know who you're watching and you know that they know what they're doing. You want to make sure that if they're talking about values, they are professional appraisers. And they have my background and expertise too. So then this comes into the office. Dr. Lori, I wonder sometimes when you're doing an appraisal and you're doing it on the spot, it's the first time you've ever seen it, and you give a value based on actual sales records when it's the first time you've seen it. Well, here's the problem with that. This is not the first time I've seen this. I've seen these objects for years and years and years. This is not new to me. It's sort of like you guys. You know the value of milk, right? You know the value of gas. You know the value of, if the prices are way high for a particular thing that you look at and that you buy or that you are aware of and with all the time. That's how it is for me with objects after objects after objects, all kinds of art, antiques, and collectibles. I've been doing this for 25 years at a rate of between 20,000 and 50,000 objects per year. So when you show me an object, you think, oh, it's the first time I've ever seen it. It might be the first time you've ever seen it, but it's not the first time I've ever seen it. And the other thing is, without doing research, I did the research. I do the research all the time. I'm constantly looking at what the values are, what the market will bear for objects. So, when I first see something on Ask Dr. Lori Live, you think it's the first time I've ever seen it. But I recognize that object. I know I have to correctly identify it, and I know what the market value will be based on actual sales records. So if you're wondering how I do this, it's not magic. It's a long time of doing it, right? It's a lot of experience as an appraiser. But I can understand why you're asking the question, but it's very similar to when you go to the store and you say, oh my gosh, the carton of milk is not, a couple bucks anymore, it's 20 bucks. You're going to know, oh gosh, there's something wrong. So knowing the market value is knowing what the markets will bear. So then I get this comment. Someone says, well, Dr. Lori, I really love you, but it took me 2 or 3 videos to get used to your personality. So I wasn't crazy about you in the beginning, but now I really think you're great. So I want to know if that happened to some of the rest of you. And I want to know, put in the comments and tell me, what did you think at your first thought? And then you just start to say, oh, wow, she really is helpful and she really is kind and she really is knowledgeable. Is that what happened to you? Or are you still like, I'm not really crazy about her? So I'd like to know. So then I get this comment, which is going to help those of you who have ever had this experience when you're trying to resell something and you have a troll or somebody who wants to sort of muddy the waters for you. It creates a big problem. So this person says, I watched Dr. Lori live. I saw you evaluate this set of pearls, a necklace and some earrings. And you said that they were one type of pearl. And I've been a person who sold pearls for a long, long time. And I disagree. I don't think that they're the type of black pearls that you talked about. They're the type of peacock pearls that you described them as. Okay. So she said, I sold them for a long time. I respectfully disagree with you. But, I don't think that they're actually this type of peacock pearl. I think they're a different type of pearl. They do this sometimes to, in fact, sort of just, mess you up. And, it's one of those tactics that people use. And, this person said, I didn't really get to see them. Well, no, you didn't see them in person. Having said that, she's kind of backing off and saying, oh, well, I didn't see them, so I reserve the right to be incorrect in my next statement, which is, hey, Dr. Lori, you're wrong, basically. She said in long and short of it, she said that my identification is incorrect, but my value is correct. So, that would be the value for them if they were what I say they are, which are peacock pearls, or what she says they are, which is something different. So if they're different, they're not the same value. That's the first problem. And the other thing is that, I see these types of pieces through videos often. She needs to see them in person. There's nothing wrong with that. There's no shame in that. But don't go backing off and criticizing somebody until you really have all of your ducks in a row, until you really know this stuff. And be careful if you're a lister when you see these types of things, when you see them, in your comments of something that you might be trying to sell online or on social media. Be aware of these people because sometimes, their agenda is not in your best interest. So then there's the people who, I love you, Dr. Lori, but, the but, right? I love you, and you know everything about everything except for the category that I buy and sell in all the time because I'm really an expert on, enter the category, whatever that is, clothes or cookie jars or vintage purses or whatever it is. Well, you know all the values and you know all the identifications and you know all the appraisals, Dr. Lori, of everything else except for what I actually buy or sell. Okay. So this person is upset because I ventured into her category, right? And I said that a particular piece was worth a value that she didn't agree with because she buys and sells this stuff. And she says that, well, so now she's unsubscribing and I'm not worth anything anymore and all of this. And I see this with particular groups who get upset when I venture into an area that they think they have control over is what it is. Now, I've done this for a long, long time. In addition to laying the groundwork and the foundation with a Ph.D. in this field, and of course, there are going to be people who will say, oh, no, I don't think it's worth that, or I can't sell it for this. Say whatever you want. My values are based on actual sales records. That's what someone has paid. This is what the market will bear. So it doesn't come out of the head, full blown out of the head of Zeus. It comes out of actual established, authenticated sales records. That's how it goes. But the fact that they turn against me so quickly when everything else I've done is wonderful until I hit, basically your house, if you will, that's the issue. I have seen this with specific types of groups. There are specific groups, and I'll see the unsubscribing on the YouTube channel from those groups once I hit something that somebody gets upset about. There are a lot of myths out there in particular areas of our antiques and collecting. I wrote a book, in fact, and that one of the things that I said in the book, this particular group was like, oh no, that's known not to be accurate, when all the scholars know that it is accurate. So, it's just a situation where folks start to say, oh, when it hits home, I don't like that Dr. Lori knows about my particular field. So, that was one of the things that I was ranting and raving about here in the office recently. Not to mention, you want to make sure that these folks are first of all, that they have their agenda has your best interest at heart. So I want you to learn what the markets are so you can make a good decision when you're reselling or when you're making a purchase of an item in a particular category. A lot of you complain about Goodwill and the thrift stores. A lot of you. The recent complaint was Goodwill is not selling their jewelry jars in the stores anymore. They're putting them all online, and you have to bid online. I like to go to the store. I want to buy them in the store. They're getting all this stuff for free, and then they're selling it for exorbitant amounts. Many, many people, including many of you, have made money, with my help and by going to Goodwill and other thrift stores, buying pieces at low prices and reselling them higher. So, if you want to go out and you say, oh, they get everything for free. They're getting donations. That's what they do. And basically, there's a lot of good stuff to be had at these thrift stores, and the prices are still quite low. Goodwill for a long time has been moving toward the idea of putting some of their higher end pieces. Actually, when they started their online auctions arm or section, they basically knew that they were going to have to be looking at the stuff that's of higher value to put that stuff online. So again, I think the complaints really should kind of be curtailed some, because I understand you're complaining, but there's a lot of good stuff to be had at these thrift stores, and a lot of people, I see it all the time because people report back to me of how much this channel has helped and how much what to look for, which is one of the things that I do all the time, but how much people have actually made. And I hope you have too, by reselling from thrift stores or reselling from, of course, other avenues. So there are the sublime and the ridiculous rants and raves, stuff that I have to deal with happily. And thanks so much. Thanks for being with me. I'll see you next time.